All right. Good afternoon, everybody. And I want to welcome everyone on the call today for the October Fellow-led feature. For those who have not done one of these before or have seen what a Fellow-led feature is all about, we do bi-monthly a kind of deep dive into a given topic, whether it be an article or a podcast or a movie, in which we kind of dive into the subject matter. And we are fortunate to be joined by Jordan Rothman, who is a 2008 Brandeis Segal Fellow, who also is a partner in his own law firm, Rothman Law Firm, to talk about not only his experiences but also how he uses his experience in the form of an op-ed and in the kind of ways that he externalizes his experiences working in law. On the call today as well, we are joined by Susie Flug Silva, who is the director for the Segal program, as well as a brand new Segal Fellow, Paul Nolan, who is the CNCS 2020 Segal Fellow. So before we start, I'm going to lay the ground rules. I'm going to be kind of helping to guide the conversation with some questions, but in the course of the conversation, people have questions of their own. If like something pops up and you just want to bring it up, this is great. But first off, Jordan, I'm going to give you this opportunity to introduce yourself, say who you are, what you're up to, and what all this content is all about.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Kyle and Susie. It's great to be on this Zoom call. So yeah, my name is Jordan Rothman. 2008 Brandeis Segal Fellow. That was the first year that the Brandeis Segal Fellow stream was created. I'm a partner at the Rothman Law Firm, LLC, which is a full-service New York and New Jersey law firm. It's me and my brother, Jared, and it's been an absolutely great time. I've been running the law firm for about 20 months now, and it's been wonderful. And we've been able to practice law, in a great way, how I've always wanted to practice law, and we've also had a lot of fun along the way. In addition to running a law firm, I'm also a blogger. I have my own student loan blog website called studentdebtdiaries.com, in which I talk about how I was able to pay off about $200,000 of student loans in a little under 4 years. In addition to that, I also blog for a legal news website called Above the Law, at which I have a weekly column on Wednesdays. Today, I'm publishing an article, for instance, and I also write the morning docket, which is basically a news summary of news that broke overnight, and it gets published at 8:30 a.m. Each morning. It's been a great joy to do the writing as well, and I have a lot more flexibility now doing that writing because I run my own law firm. I don't work for other people. I don't have to worry about upsetting my bosses.
That's great. And it's awesome. Like, that is quite a feat to have 4 years and, six-figure debt to be paid off. And I'm sure we can learn a lot in this process. Student loan debt is a part of this conversation. So, for those of you who are still paying off loans or want to get tips on how to do it, feel free to ask questions along the way. But I want to start with my first question, which was, what made you, Jordan, with all of your responsibilities, being a partner of a law firm, kind of really being a business owner, realize that you needed to externalize your thoughts on the issue related to the law field in the form of op-ed?
That's such a great question. I'd say the genesis of me working with Above the Law is I've known the people at Above the Law for many years. I was a fan of that website for over a decade. When I was a baby lawyer, I used to sneak looking at the website during work, and I would check for articles. I just love Above the Law. I used to go to their events and all of that. And then about a year after I paid off my student loans, I started Student Debt Diaries. And my goal around Student Debt Diaries was to create a counter narrative to folks who, were struggling with their student loans and were kind of, didn't seem like they had agency over their student debt issues. And I wanted to create a website where people can really talk about how they can tackle their student loans to support others who are along this path. So I got linked into Above the Law because I was like, how am I going to hawk this new blog that I started? I'd only published 3 or 4 articles on the blog before I reached out to the folks at Above the Law, but they knew me from all the, frankly, the parties that I had gone to with them. And I'm 6'9" tall. So they knew me as the tall guy who would go to their parties. So I did a sample article. They liked it. And very, very soon after I started writing, I became one of the top columnists on the website. I still am one of the top columnists on the website by number of views. I started writing for student debt topics in the first, year or so. And then once I opened up my own law firm, I kind of transitioned more toward discussing more general topics within the legal field. And it's been an absolute joy. The articles can be read as many as 10,000 to over 100,000 times a week. I communicate with people across the country. As one aside, there's this one individual who would send me funny emails over the months. And I found out last week that individual is a United States federal judge. So it's very interesting. I've had conversations with Michael Avenatti, who is Stormy Daniels' lawyer. I've had conversations with people from across the country and in a lot of different fields, and it's been a real joy.
That's great. And I think the second question I had, which was, why op-eds? Why is the medium of the opinion editorial something that you felt was the way that you could express yourself? And for those that are listening on, as well as those on the conversation, what are some ways, like, what's the barrier to entry to starting their own op-ed? Because I want it to not just be, you have to be a partner of your own firm to start one, or to be, an expert. So to kind of break down the question, it's why op-eds, and how hard would it be for someone to do one on their own?
Those are great questions. I really believe in the power of opinion pieces, especially opinion pieces that, can be published on a leading news website, that can be shared on the internet, that could really, percolate out to thousands and thousands of people. When I look online and I see where my articles are getting cited to, they're getting cited to in all over the place. In academic articles, they're being translated into other languages. I mean, it's very interesting to see the effect that those articles have on the legal profession, both here and internationally. And in terms of the barriers to entry, it's really quite simple to start your own blog. I could walk people through the process. Feel free to reach out to me. It's a little bit more difficult to get attached to an established website. I've helped some people get connected with Above the Law along the way. So that news outlet, if you have a really good perspective and you have a good sample piece, they'll let you in. The other thing that you have to think about is a lot of news outlets don't want one-off pieces. They want regular pieces, so that people who read the website can get an understanding of this person, look forward to their articles, and will come back. That is extremely challenging. It's very challenging to write an article each week. So a lot of op-ed writers will kind of, simmer out after a few weeks because they just don't have enough ideas. I've been doing it for years, over 3 years, on my student loan website and Above the Law. I've written hundreds and hundreds of articles. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind. You have to keep, the well cannot go dry. You have to keep reinventing yourself. And that's kind of another reason why I transitioned more from student loans to the law, is because I just needed more article ideas. So that's another barrier to entry as well.
Right. And I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts as well, because I know for me, as someone who really cares about social issues, I know Segal Fellows are people who really care about solving the intractable problems of today, and are defining what it means to be a citizen leader. It's sometimes you feel like you're screaming into a closet, right? Like, all you can think is, I have all these internalized ideas about how I want the world to be, how I want to see it for the future. And sometimes it feels like the only way to really get those words out there is to externalize it. And, I'll open it to the other people on the call if they have any thoughts, but, about the idea of, either what you've wanted to do in terms of externalizing your thoughts on social issues, or maybe even your frustrations with it, if you have any thoughts on that, and if maybe you think op-eds might be an option for you. Does anybody have any thoughts on the call?
I just loved in what you explained, Jordan, that along the way, it's always for you not only about what you're doing, but the process and how you can bring others along. So even that you've already connected people to this, and that you're willing to talk with people about op-eds, I just appreciate that you're bringing.
Susie, you're 100% accurate, and I actually have ideas for articles that I don't think I have. It's not my story to tell. I have ideas for articles that I think the legal profession really needs to hear, but I just don't feel that coming from my own hand and publishing it under my name would be as powerful as if someone else did. For instance, I've wanted to write articles about how some of the sexist vestiges that last in the legal profession to this day, and I can name many. But I never really thought that if that was coming from me, it would be as powerful as if it came from someone else. So I've tried to sort of elevate other people's voices who might want to say these, these perspectives. Another article idea that I've really wanted to write is how why court reporters are vastly predominantly female, and I don't really understand why that is. And it does it go back to antiquated notions in the legal profession, or like a biases, or I really would love to attack that issue. And I just never really felt comfortable doing it. So I think it's important to elevate other voices that could add an interesting perspective to the marketplace that I myself really shouldn't or couldn't add myself.
Well, I love that you're doing that broadly. And I know Jordan, and if anyone else is listening, just all the legal folks got an email from Phyllis Segal, our founder, about connecting with some legal stuff this week. And so if you have other ideas, I think keeping our Segal Fellow and Segal Network group of legal folks connected and tapped into the ideas that emerge from across you guys will be great to do. Thanks for sharing that, Jordan.
Excellent. So, so speaking on your content, we linked to 3 different pieces that you had before we go into the actual podcast that you did, because I think that's another great extension of the opinion editorial. Is the 3 articles we sent out to people is one is about hazing being prevalent in many law firms. The second one was that for smaller law firms, there should be uniform pay scales. And the third ones were that associates should share salary information with each other. This seems like you like to talk a lot about the internal, sausage making of the law world. And I want to know, first off, do you feel that that is something that translates well to an external audience through an op-ed? The idea of like, this is what happens inside a law firm.
Yes.
And can, is it translatable, or is it something that really it's for lawyers, by lawyers, for the intention?
Good point. That's a really good point. So some yes, some no. The issue of sharing salary information, I think, can be broadly applied to other fields. And that's actually, I was very happy to write that article. I got a lot of positive feedback. That has been a difficult topic at law firms. Honestly, at some law firms, it's been actively said by the bosses that no, like, you shouldn't share salary information. It might create friction among the employees. But in actuality, sharing salary information is really the only way that you could find out if people are getting paid differently for illicit reasons. And actually, at one of the firms at which I worked, a female person of color found out that she was getting paid significantly less than me and another male colleague, even though she had 1 more year of experience. And it was because we shared her salary information. How would you know? You don't know. And also, but that being the case, the issue of hazing, I guess, also could broadly apply to other fields. It is a very prevalent issue at many firms, especially the big law type law firms. When I say big law, it's a term of art in the legal industry. It's like the top 50 or so law firms that pay the same, high salary to young attorneys. And in exchange, you're typically required to work very long hours and kiss the ring, et cetera. At those shops, there is oftentimes a culture of hazing. I don't know if that is so prevalent in other industries. But also, I believe the issue of uniform pay scales is also really necessary because when you don't pay someone as much, it has ripples across their career, because typically future employers will base how much they offer you. And of course, there are laws now that prohibit employers from asking in certain jurisdictions how much you make. But this could have ripple effects throughout your career, because if you get paid less now, it might go into the future. So that could actually apply to other industries as well. And these are topics that a lot of people want discussed, but a lot of people can't voice it because they have bosses, they work at firms. I don't have a boss. I don't work at a firm. I work for myself, or I work for my own firm. So I'm much more able to convey these opinions.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I was reading all this stuff, was that there's some universality to what you were talking about. While it was through the language of law, the language of the business of law, what I took a lot from the conversation, and especially thinking about it holistically about what you do as someone who writes op-eds, is that, it's the kind of pieces that we talk about as Segal Fellows, which is self-advocacy, standing up for yourself, defending your position, you know, knowing that, and then when you do get to place a position of strength or power, that you use it to lift others as opposed to continuing the status quo of what you're doing. And I think it's very interesting to me that you are now an owner, you're your own boss, and you're still talking about things that you went through when you were an intern, junior partner, and all that stuff. And so knowing that we have you in this space, I want to ask you, and please feel free to ask anybody else have questions of their own on the call, is has your perspective when you write these pieces changed since going from a junior partner to someone who now kind of manages budget and finances and kind of is the one who pays people and all that stuff? So has your perspective changed when you write these articles and stuff like that?
That's a very good point. There is a lot about managing a law firm that you do not learn anything about as an associate attorney who just works at a law firm. And you mentioned some of them, you know, managing cash flow, sending bills to clients, you know, a lot of administrative tasks that you have to do when you own a law firm that you don't have to deal with when you're an associate. So that definitely informs my perspective on a lot of things. Also, like running a law firm, there are certain things that I feel empowered to talk about, like how the mechanics of other law firms work. And then other topics I need to stay away from because I'm running a business, you know, and I don't want to alienate potential clients. So I also need to kind of manage that a little bit. And there are certain articles I would love to write, certain opinions I would love to express, but sometimes I just can't do it because it might affect my bottom line. And I have my partner, who's also my brother, to think about. So I do try to stick to talking about firm mechanics because I feel that I could do so without, you know, alienating clients. But there are other other opinions that are broader about the legal profession, which I might have some issues, you know. So I try to, you know, I try to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. And I posted a question for the chat so they can kind of like mull over the idea of it for people on the call. And this is not just an op-ed, but just being visible on the ever-present idea of online is like, how much pressure do you feel putting your name onto your opinions when you go?
Oh, that's so interesting, Kyle. I don't say anything political online. Nothing ever, because I never want to alienate potential clients, you know. It's one thing to talk about your opinion on the legal industry. It's another thing to opine on an issue that is really heated politically and could alienate half of the people out there. So for me personally, I really stay out of it.
Mm. And so this is another one of those points where I'm going to open it to the call, because I know for me, I know that like I have very strong opinions. I know that I have a lot of strong thoughts about things that happen. I also recognize my positionality in that idea that I'm, you know, a white male in a lot of these spaces talking about, you know, different issues. And so, so for me, I always have that inner struggle of figuring out when I can speak on something that I feel I have to put my name on, and that might have consequences for me. And so I just think it's interesting in the form of the op-ed because you are not only putting your opinion, but your opinion's being like advertised to people. It's being linked to, it's being kind of seen as a position of expertise. So I'm going to open this to the chat. So this doesn't have to just be about law or about op-eds, but, you know, does anybody in the chat feel that way about opinions and having your name attached to it online? Yeah. So, oh yeah, Paul, it looks like you were unmuted.
Oh yeah, can I just like hop in on that?
Yeah, absolutely, go for it.
That's something I've actually been thinking about, sort of in the back of my mind, just, I don't know, over the past like year or two, that it does kind of feel like the world is crazy at times, and I feel like I want to use my own position to make an opinion known or put it out there, but I'm also like very cautious and aware that the second you hit publish or it gets taken up and it gives some validity to it, right? Like that concerns me, and is that going to live in perpetuity somewhere? And Jordan, I'm curious too, like how do you balance that, and how do you sort of take a position unapologetically but also not alienate folks or
Paul,
your long-term reputation?
It's very tricky. I want you to know, a lot of thought goes into my articles. I've already written my article that I'm going to publish a week from today so that I could think about the effects of what my article is going to be. But let me tell you, I have written articles that have been read over 100,000 times. That's my definition of viral for myself, you know, and this only happened to me like 5-10 times that were so negatively taken. And I had absolutely no idea that this was going to be a negatively taken article. And it really broke my heart in one instance that I did get such a negative feedback. I can give you an example if you want to find it online. It's always the articles that I don't think are gonna, you know, it's always the ones that my most popular article ever, I wrote so quickly and didn't care about it at all. And it got read like 200,000 times, you know, it's always those articles. But anyways, it was an article about how lawyers should not use the word Esquire. Okay. I said, lawyers should not use the word Esquire. Stop being full of yourself. Don't use the word Esquire. I call other lawyers Esquire as a sign of respect. I never like put my own name Esquire. Esquire is typically used by lawyers to denote that they are admitted as an attorney to a state bar or federal bar, as opposed to a lawyer who isn't admitted to a bar. So got horrible reactions. It was shared thousands of times on social media. One of the biggest negative reactions was that a lot of female attorneys, dozens of female attorneys, emailed me and said, you know, I have to use the word Esquire because if I don't use the word Esquire, people are going to think I'm a court reporter or a secretary, and you can't tell me that I can't use the word Esquire. This was something I had never contemplated. I never thought that was going to be I never really I have seen female attorneys at deposition be thought of as the court reporter before. I've seen that in my life. I never took it a step further and understood that Esquire would be a way for female lawyers to show that they're lawyers and not other professionals. It really, honestly, it broke my heart. It really, I can't even, it really affected me. I still get emotional about it because, you know, it was very negative and it wasn't my intention. So it's difficult, Paul. It really is. It's difficult. And actually, can I tell you one more thing? I have random people I've met over the years on the internet. I've never met them in person who read some of my articles, and I've never met these people. And they read my articles and they give me like really good feedback. And I have a few people for different, like I have an article. Anyways, so I try to get more eyes on it now to make sure that doesn't happen.
Great.
Well, hi guys. I'm sorry I came in late, but I just wanted to show my respect to Jordan, who I've known since Brandeis, and I have followed your articles. I'm so impressed and amazed with you. From what I gather, you're talking about posting online about your opinions, and I'm also a lawyer, and I can tell you it takes a lot of bravery for what Jordan is doing, especially with how open he's been about the student debt and the loan crisis, which many people, I feel that there's this kind of attitude that lawyers want to show that they're very successful. So even though the majority of them are really deep in debt, they still want to drive the Mercedes and have the fancy car and have all the debt, and they don't want anybody to know that they're struggling. So I just feel like that's been super brave of Jordan. Also, I work with my father, and Jordan has written about working with his family. And just like Jordan, I've had an amazing experience, but that's not everyone's experience. But, you know.
Did you read that article? It got a lot of views, that article about.
Yeah, I did.
I was thinking about you, yeah.
Yeah, I read it because, you know, a lot of people ask me, as I'm sure they asked Jordan, what is it like to work with your family? And that must be so difficult. And, you know, we have such a great relationship. And for me, it's really helped advance me forward in a way that I know if I worked in a different firm, it wouldn't. And, you know, on another point, I just wanted to say that one of my best mentors has told me that the way that as a lawyer, you can really make yourself a scholar or really advance yourself and show your colleagues that you're serious is by writing articles. And I think a lot of young, whether you're a lawyer or whether you're in another field, you always feel this like sense of, do I have anything to say? Or do I know enough yet? Or am I an expert enough? And so I really applaud Jordan. That's why I wanted to come and, you know, show my support for what he's doing.
Counselor, you were too good to me. You were too good to me. And I haven't seen you since the 2011 Segal retreat. So
It's been a while, for
it's been a
sure.
while. I remember that retreat well. There's a picture of us on Facebook from it. So it's so good to see you.
Me too.
And I talk about, do you read my morning dockets at all? I talk about South Florida quite a bit. All right. You got to behave yourselves down there. What are you doing? No, I'm kidding.
So for accessibility purposes, for those who are just listening to the podcast, that was Amber Kornreich, who is a 2011 Brandeis Segal Fellow, who has joined us on the call. So kind of continue the conversation where we're going on this. One other question that I had was on the student loan debt crisis, and something that you talk a lot. But before we get to that, it seems like the chat has mentioned that there's another question or a comment. So open it up to you, Susie.
Thanks. And Amber, thanks for joining us. It's great to have new and old fellows connecting and reconnecting. But Jordan, before Kyle takes us to the next question, I just wanted to appreciate what you said about sort of where you come from with your writing, and that you've had instances already where you realize that the way you think about something, you might learn a lot by getting the feedback, or what you intend to write impacts other people differently. And so your example of the use of the word Esquire was really interesting. And one of the things that we've seen from feedback from Segal Fellows over the years is that one of the biggest metrics we get really high ratings from you guys as fellows on is that we've expanded your connection to a broader group and a more diverse group of individuals making change in the world. And so I think as more and more people think about, how do I expand my perspective, not just for a blog piece, but as a citizen leader? I just didn't know if you had any more that you wanted to add to that, or Paul or Amber, ways that you've really helped broaden your sense of how you think about something by connecting with others, not just in the Segal network, but more broadly. I was interested in this. I saw somebody post about the current justice going through her hearings this week, and how she spoke about her children, and that some people felt that she described her adopted children, who are Black and from Haiti, differently from how she described her other children. And for today, I don't think we would debate, who feels about what, but all the comments that I saw were, did she have nobody in her network who reviewed? I mean, she had a prepared remarks that people reviewed. Did she not have anyone in her network who could bring a different perspective to how she was thinking about her prepared remarks? So I just wanted to leave space to build on what you said about that, Jordan, either from you or Amber, Paul, Kyle, or otherwise.
I got to tell you, sometimes I forget that practicing law in the Northeast is different than in many other parts of the country, including in more rural areas. So I'll make a grand, for instance, let me give you an example. One time I wrote an article about how your adversary is full of crap. And I said they're full of crap because they're citing out-of-state authority, which Amber will know is usually a bad sign. It means you have nothing in your state to support your argument. So you're reaching for anything. But this one lawyer in rural Nevada emailed me and it said, no, we just don't have a lot of authority in our state. It's a smaller legal community. There's not a lot of cases. And that actually reminded me, one time I had a case in the Virgin Islands, and the Virgin Islands doesn't have a lot of legal activity. So oftentimes they reach for other authorities, so they have something to support their position. Also, everything about the legal profession is different in other regions. For instance, in response to my Esquire article, in the Northeast, where you guys are, apparently, you can tell me if this is true or not, you refer to an attorney as attorney Rothman, so-and-so. I've never heard that before, but apparently in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire, that's a thing. So that's something that I have to keep in mind. And I have some rural lawyers, that I've talked to over the years that help me with that as well. I wrote an article about rural lawyers. It was actually cited by some really random, rural lawyer associations all across the country. And they actually said I was making fun of rural lawyers without knowing it. So I feel, yeah, I know. I still mentioned Green Acres. I put that in. I felt very confident about the Green Acres reference, but I defanged some of that because I got this perspective from this lawyer in Texas who I'd been corresponding with for many years.
That says a lot to you, that you take that, you learn from it, you grow, you don't ignore it. So. Yeah.
Oh my God, 100%. I haven't been trolled in a very long time, and I hope to keep it that way because I try to be holistic in how I approach these articles.
So just kind of continuing on the conversation, because I would be remiss if we didn't discuss your understanding and experiences with the student loan debt crisis. I think it's brave that you're willing to open up about your debt. And I know this is something that could be pretty universal for those of specific generations that, because I know for me, I graduated around the 2008 economic crash. So for me, finance was just something I was way behind the ball on because of the economic strife that came from that recession. So I want to applaud that you're willing to talk about finances, but maybe if you can help, and maybe people can jump in and talk about as well, maybe questions is, how do you, use your own experiences with your own debt to tell the story of the debt crisis? And, can people who listen to you read your op-eds, or people in the chat benefit from doing the same?
That's a great question, Kyle. And yeah, student loans is not sexy. It's well, actually, some people like financial responsibility. If I'm being completely honest, when I bring that up on the apps and whatnot, but it's not a sexy topic. It's not something you talk about with your peers. So in terms of, I do acknowledge that my student debt story is in a large part my own story. Like, I did things that I could do that many other people couldn't do. For instance, I worked in big law for a little over a year. That helped me pay off a substantial amount of student loans. In other industries, there's no equivalent. And then also, I worked for a leading bar review company as a part-time job for years. And that really helps me pay off my student loans. Obviously, there's not a similar equivalent. Bar review company is a company that helps people studying for the bar exam. I did some legal freelancing and other things, that aren't approachable to other people in other fields. But there are certain topics that I do discuss in terms of, blogging to pay off student loans, some websites that I went to make extra money. I actually did, at the 2015 Segal retreat, I did a presentation about student loans. This is going way back. And it was a lot of fun. I still had about $40,000 in student loans at that time. So I'd be happy to be a resource to people who are facing student loans, and I would definitely direct you to my blog for more information. I published 173 articles about student loans.
And that to some people might, is a huge number, and for some people they're dealing with $20,000 loans. Some people are dealing with much bigger numbers, and I think it's interesting to hear your thoughts on that. I opened it to the chat, the question of what are some of your thoughts you've had about sharing financial information online or discussing things that you've dealt with financially when you're talking online, being visible online, or is it something that you keep at an arm's length, kind of like the Instagram version of your life where you don't bring up any financial hardship and stuff like that? So I've been opening it to the chat about that question. Yeah, and I know for me, people, it's one of those universalities that people feel kind of shy when they talk about that stuff. They're particularly guarded, even if they're very open people. The idea of talking about how much money you do or don't have is a real issue. So it's really great that you can be candid about it, I think.
I get trolled for it a lot. A lot of people like to just throw up their hands and say, I can't do anything. I'm stuck. What do you expect me to do? About anything, so it's tough to be told no, you can sacrifice, you can work part-time jobs. And it was hard. Kyle, I was working 100-hour weeks. I had 5 part-time jobs. I was really certain weeks were just unbelievable. All, relationships I had with anyone ceased in certain periods of that time because I just had to focus on the part-time jobs. I was singularly committed to it. But it is difficult because a lot of people, like to believe that they don't have agency over it. So they don't like looking at a situation where people did take action. And so that's a challenge that I face a lot of the time.
I also feel positionality takes is a real key part of the conversation with finances. Recognizing that the law firm has a higher income potential than other jobs or other careers going into. So I think for me, I think being open about how income is played into it, especially starting income, and advocating for the elevation of starting income and in the form of it, I think for me is a real part of the debt relief, because I feel like the conversations is more about shaming about people who've graduated within the past 10, 15 years on taking so much substantial debt without discussing wage stagnation, without discussing, unpaid internships, without discussing unequal pay for women, that kind of stuff. And I feel like
let me add something to that.
Yeah.
Kyle, in the legal profession, and I talk about this on the podcast interview I gave with the people at Start New, in the legal profession, you have all of that. And then you also had law schools were like basically misrepresenting their employment statistics for years to law students, prospective law students, so they would come to their law schools. And this has been clamped down over the years, and what they would do is they would take like a small percentage of the class and say that the median income for the class is from a small sample size, or they would count people as with any job as fully employed, after 9 months or whatever. They would fudge the numbers, and this is clamped down in recent years. But for many people who graduated, around the Great Recession, from law school, they didn't have all the information. They didn't have their eyes wide open because they were being, misrepresented to. This is not as big a deal now. There's law school transparency, other websites that keep a tab on it. But yeah, I mean, I'm right with you, and I understand that in a lot of situations, it's much more difficult than the situation I was blessed to have. So I absolutely understand that perspective.
Well, and I appreciate that you guys are bringing in a lot of the bigger picture stuff too. And I know there's also so much more now going into the counseling for taking on the cost of education and
right.
ways that people can finance that in advance. And it's important that you're helping people tackle that afterwards, Jordan. We've also had some great conversations with fellows, and it's interesting to hear the conversation during the election this year too about the structural issues of, how expensive education is and different plans that people have for increased free access to public education or other things.
Right.
Because I think for me, what I'm learning a lot from the experience that you brought up with op-eds, and for a lot of time speaking with the fellows and also learning more about the program of the Segal program, is finding ways of tethering everyone's, the issues that everyone faces into what you talk about. So Jordan, it could be you talking about how law and student debt is related to uneven gender discrimination when it comes to pay, whether it comes to how people label themselves and feel self-worth in their work, so labor rights issues. It could be even openly talking about, how you interact with your employer, how do you interact with your coworkers and stuff like that. And it's all stuff that I think is really tied. So I really appreciate the kind of conversations that you're getting out of it. And one thing that I think is a really good way to close, another last topic we can talk about, is the idea of podcasting, because you've done a podcast recently. And first off, it'd be great to talk about your experience with that. Also barriers to entry and like what's starting a podcast, because I know I can have experience with it. Like I'm actually using a podcast microphone right now, just to get me sounding nice and crisp and clean. So, what was the experience like with podcast? Is it, what is some ways that it can be better than the written op-ed idea? And what was your experience with it too?
That is such a great question. And it is way more different than op-eds being in a podcast. I had the really good pleasure of doing a student loan podcast, but both of the people conducting the podcast interview were attorneys. And they were huge fans of Above the Law, which is the website that I work for. So it was a very friendly audience, it was very understanding of what I was talking about. And actually at a lot of points I had to kind of back up and be like, oh wait, like maybe people won't know what a bar review course is because, I'm talking to two attorneys, but the podcast interview was obviously for a much wider audience. I think the thing about writing is it's easier, I think, for people to take what you say out of context because they can kind of take a snippet, and I guess they could take a soundbite too. But I'm telling you, when you take a soundbite, like something in the middle of a conversation, it definitely seems like that's what you're doing. If you take a snippet of text, it could seem like there's more authority, in my opinion. So I've seen that happen before, where I'll have like, you know, an errant like sentence that, you know, people don't like, which is frustrating. But I think podcasts are amazing. Also, like people don't people don't like to read long articles, you know? Like if you look at an article, and you know, if you look at the studies, people usually stop after like the first 150 words, you know? My articles I cap it out at about it's like 800 to 1,000, you know, 800 to 1,000. So I try to keep it shorter, but in podcasts, you can convey information that people can potentially digest at their own pace, and it's easier. So there's a lot of great differences. I'm hopefully doing a webinar with the folks at Above the Law soon. I'm in talks to do that. And I hope I continue to explore different mediums for giving my opinions.
I also feel like your personality comes out, which is really good in a podcast. So Amber, it looks like you had something you wanted to say. Go for it.
Oh, well, I just agree with everything that Jordan says. And I think when it comes to podcasts, it's such a different format, and that, you know, I had the opportunity once to be on one. And even though I had prepared all kinds of things that I was going to say, just like this conversation today, it really went in so many other directions. And I feel like when it comes to writing an article, you know, you can really clean up everything, and you can really make sure that you're keeping it in a really tight way, so that, you know, perhaps to try to shield yourself from criticism. But so I think podcast is a great medium, and it seems like it's really, really popular right now. So it's a fantastic thing to get involved with. Congratulations, Jordan.
You're too good to me. Really, you're too good to me. Don't you remember when I used to wear like sweatpants in Red Brandeis? Come on.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So Amber, do you mind if we share that podcast that you were on with people? I would love to, if you have that itch, if you want to email it to me, we can happily share with people.
Sure. You know, I'm a divorce lawyer, so I was talking about how to have a happy divorce. So I'd be happy to share with you.
I would love to hear that too. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially, I watched the Marriage Story show, or it's like Marriage Story on Netflix, and it made the whole process seem just awful. So I'd love to hear a more crazy perspective on it. So
yeah, unfortunately, that movie didn't portray divorce lawyers in such a nice way, but
no, they were definitely the villains of that movie. So and I also want to reference the chat who mentioned that they like podcasts, and so it seems very universal as a way for people to do information, because we like to multitask. So like I listen to podcasts while I'm doing work or while I'm, you know, doing other things. And it's a nice like tangential experience that I think people like to do. And I also want to shout out another fellow who has a podcast that just came out. He has his second episode happened this week. His name is Leotis Boswell Johnson, who is the 2018 City Year Fellow. And he has a podcast called Unlearning that he does with another person. And it's about structural racism, how education perpetuates issues around race, and how we can better that conversation. And I think it's a really good, you know, him and Bianca Wright are the people that run the podcast. So knowing that someone could just, in the middle of law school, you know, doing his commitments with Segal, and just kind of, also he runs his own nonprofit, so, and still has time to do a podcast. It's a really good way to get that going. So we only have a few minutes left, so I want to open this up for a little bit of Q&A of any final questions that people might have for Jordan, or just in general about op-eds, podcasts, writing about law, talking about law, or even just talk about social issues in general. I'm going to open it up to the chat to ask those questions.
well, so while we're waiting for questions, Jordan, you know, have you ever struggled with that feeling that I was kind of mentioning, the imposter syndrome of writing, that you're concerned that you second guess what you've written, or you feel like it's not good enough, or you don't know enough yet, or that there's going to be some lawyer who's been practicing for 50 years reading it out there? How do you deal with that?
Oh man, Amber, it's definitely an issue, and I get trolled all the time. And people oftentimes troll me for saying like, who is this guy? Why do I care about his opinion? And then also I get trolled for my people say my writing sucks. You know, like I get trolled a lot, and it's tough because I have thin skin. I have thin skin at Brandeis. I have thin skin now. Something I need to work on. It's definitely difficult. It's difficult. But listen, I mean, I know that I'm doing the right thing when people reach out to me and they applaud my work. You know, for instance, you know, judges across the country have reached out to me, and you know, mostly, you know, some retired judges, some state judges. As I said recently, a federal judge. I didn't even know he was a federal judge, you know, has been reaching out to me repeatedly about my articles and says he likes my articles. He always says, keep it up, you know, stuff like that, which is really cool. It really helps me. You know, I've been in, you know, obviously my articles are viewed a lot, tens of thousands of times, sometimes over 100,000 times. And I'm at the top of above the law in that regard. Which is great. Also, I get republishing requests all across the legal world. I got one from Thomson Reuters yesterday. I got like a lot of people want to republish it. So then I can go on and on and on. So I try to just think of the good stuff. You know, you're talking to all these really great people. People like, you know, reach out to you. People want to republish you. You know, which is a great thing. And it kind of reduces that, but it's tough. It is tough. You know, it's a difficult thing, but you know, you just understand that you're making a difference and you're talking for people who can't necessarily give their perspective. So that kind of moves you forward.
I think this is a good last question for the chat, and I think is a good way of capping off our conversation, which is what the question of why me, right? Why do I feel like I'm able to speak on this subject, have kind of some sort of expertise on this subject, have some sort of authority. And I want to open it up to the whole room to say if they felt that way ever and how they've navigated that. I know, you know, Paul, you're just starting your CNCS journey. Amber, you're working with your family on a law firm. You know, Susie and I are constantly writing about social issues, especially racial issues, as two white people operating in a very diverse program. So I want to open that up to the group. Like, how you know, how do you struggle with that question of why me, and kind of keep that open?
It's definitely a challenge when you start something, and I've had to start a few things in my life. You know, when I started the blog, definitely were a lot of haters, you know, and it was difficult. But I thought I had a unique perspective. And then I used the blog to kind of, you know, parlay that into a position with Above the Law. And I used Above the Law to position to writing for the American Bar Association and other things. And then now I'm like, well, I have all this stuff. So, you know, maybe I feel a little bit more comfortable, like, you know, expressing my opinion, et cetera. And then, of course, with starting my law firm, you know, I quit my job and it was a great job and I really enjoyed working it. But, I just knew that I just had to be bold and go out there and do it. And if other people could do it, why not me? So ultimately, you have to understand that if you have a good perspective and you're good at conveying your opinion, you should do it, because this is a marketplace of ideas. And this is the 21st century. This is, you know, it's the internet. Anyone can get on the internet, you know? So I would definitely compel people, if you have a perspective, if you want to get into the experience of, you know, conveying your opinions, to it. You know, you can get it done. I'll help you if I can. And I would definitely suggest doing it.
And just open up to the rest of the chat on their thoughts.
Well, I've certainly felt it, and I sometimes continue to feel it even when I, you know, tell myself not to. You know, in my position, I've done a lot less scholarship than Jordan has, but I've been trying to break into it because I know that it's really how you bring yourself to the next level professionally. So in my case, what I've tried to do is, if I do write something, I try to focus on a narrow topic that I really do feel like I either is unique to myself. Like, I love Jordan's topic about writing about being in a family firm. That's something that is my own experience. So really, if someone's criticizing me, they're criticizing my own feelings, rather than saying, oh, well, here's, you know, Florida law on equitable distribution or something, you know, that's far more people are expert at than myself. I've also gotten involved with some technological issues. And sometimes in the tech space, there are people out there who are really appreciative for, I just wrote an article on PDF-A, and I'm in a particular group that is mostly older lawyers, and some very basic topics are of major interest to them. So if you can choose something that you really feel comfortable about, a narrow enough topic that you can really educate yourself as much as possible, it can help you have a little bit more confidence. And I think, like Jordan said, once you've done a few little articles, you say, okay, maybe now I feel a little bit more confident to jump into something more substantive or more complicated.
All right, so I'm going to be respectful of people's times. It's about 1 o'clock. I'm going to stop the recording now. But before I do that, I want to thank you again, Jordan, and thank everybody else for being on this chat.